sports flowing in their veins. Mackey and Judd on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
I would think that there would be an inclination to try to bring in somebody with an offensive background. Again, doesn't mean it's a disqualifier if you have a defensive coach or somebody on special teams, but I would think that you were going to look heavily into the offensive bucket just to try to figure out, with all that bright young talent on offense and frankly some of the frustration that you've heard expressed in very diplomatic terms by the likes of Justin Jefferson about how they're playing football, it would make a lot of sense to try to just inject some new juice. There's always a theory within the NFL you kind of do the opposite from your previous head coach, so hiring a young offensive-minded person would certainly be a potential fit.
There he is.
Looking
there
good.
he is, one of the founding fathers of 1500ESPN.com, Tom Pelissero, NFL Network. How'd you guys enjoy your super wild card weekend? It's not even over yet. We get a Monday night.
It's not over, baby.
The Rock is going to join the Eli Manning cast tonight. Be a blast.
I got a statement about it.
About that? About The Rock joining?
No.
Rock knows how you feel about
the
Pie?
weekend.
Oh,
about the weekend.
Super wild.
I don't want to weigh in yet.
Okay, we'll get to statements. Purple Daily today too. We're just we're feeding you all of the news, information, and speculation that we can as the Vikings look to redo their organization. So over the weekend, some really interesting information coming out about the Vikings culture under Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman. We had some comments from Deion Sanders, a great insider piece from Ben Gessling, and Andrew Kramer and Mark Craig also contributed to that. So I think let's go through some of the things that have reportedly happened recently and over the years that led to where we are now with the Vikings. And then we can spin it ahead by discussing, okay, based on what we know happened, what needs to change? What should they really be looking to accomplish here as these searches get underway over the last couple of days? And this is Mackey and Judd, your home for Minnesota sports, daily entertainment, speculation, sometimes just Judd fighting with Cousins Crusaders on Twitter all weekend long. We'll give you whatever you need here.
It's my calling. I do what I got to do.
I love it. You just,
exactly right.
You pulled out your sword and just for 48 hours.
Yep.
You were John Stark, the John Stark gif of all the army, and just
fire
alone.
Fire and brimstone, gentlemen. That's what that was. Fire and brimstone fittingly on a Sunday. I would have preferred to rest. I didn't get the opportunity, okay?
That's hilarious. So, all right. So, Deion Sanders, so he's on the Barstool Sports Pro Football Show. And on Saturday's pregame edition of that show, Deion said he spoke with his dear friend and former position coach, Mike Zimmer, during the week. And he said Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman hadn't talked in months, and it was a downward spiral. Months, as in plural, as in multiple months.
Yep.
That's what Mike Zimmer told Deion Sanders. And then in the same breath, Deion also said, and I'm paraphrasing here, he made a comment about what do all the coaches that got fired have in common? Look at the quarterback play. And it was like he was delivering it as his opinion, but it was literally like a continuation of his Mike Zimmer sentence. And so I'm guessing in that phone conversation between those two guys, Mike Zimmer had a thing or two to say about Kirk Cousins, who he's never really taken a liking to over the last 4 years. Mm-hmm. So that was interesting. Mm-hmm. And then I'd love to go through here with you guys. Well, first off, what do you think about the fact that Zimmer and Spielman haven't talked in months?
I think that is a complete indictment of the people who own this team, because of the man who literally manages the 53-man roster and the man who leads them on the field aren't talking. It's the first of many things that I'd like to be clear in saying this. We, Phil, Judd, Declan, we erred in our earlier discussions throughout the course of this year, because despite being told that we were being reckless and that we were full of BS and that's nothing, you guys are assuming things at TCO Performance Center were worse than we said. Like yes. we should have gone heavier. We didn't know to, but my point is, for anybody out there, fans or people in our business who tried to gloss over what was going on, it was worse than what we said. And I think we were the only ones, aside from probably like Collar, who said this is bad. But shame on the Wilfs for either not knowing or knowing and doing nothing about the fact that there was obviously a long period of time. Because why would Mike lie to Deion privately? He wouldn't. Where the GM and coach quit talking. Shame on the Wilfs. Because if they didn't know, that's a red flag.
By the way,
if they did know, that's a red flag.
Yeah. When Mike says that to Deion, those guys are friends going back 20, 25 years, right? Those guys worked together with the Cowboys in the 90s. When they have that phone conversation, Mike's not thinking about Deion as media Deion. Like Deion does some stuff for Barstool. I think he's done it at NFL Network, right? He's the Jackson State coach, and he does some stuff for Barstool.
Correct.
And so, Zimmer is talking to his friend and then probably not realizing, oh, yeah, my friend also has this huge internet football show, and sometimes he's going to say some things.
And probably
not that like Zimmer probably wants that out there, right? Yeah, my GM's an idiot, and we didn't get along. And
Mike probably told Deion way more.
Oh,
and said, don't bring this stuff up.
Yeah.
But so this was worse than we ever came close to saying, and we thought it wasn't good.
Also, I think one of the things that bothers me is there are people with microphones in the Twin Cities that instead of shining a light on the truth or just like discussing the truth and figuring out what to do going forward, actively lied to their audiences about this football team. And that rubs me the wrong way. We're not always right by any means on this show. Every Wednesday, accountability session, right? We are wrong a lot. But our sense was right. And we usually, like throughout the 8 years of us doing a show together, we differ on things and we tend to disagree and we hash things out. And it's like we've been so much in lockstep the last 6 months about this football team. We've both covered the NFL, you more than I have. We've both been around organizations. I covered baseball a lot more than I cover. You can tell when things are off. You can tell when players are acting weird. You can tell when the energy is low. You can tell when coaches and managers are making little drive-by sideways comments about their superiors that like something's not right. And something felt off the entire season about this football team. And you're right, it was actually worse than we thought. Let's go through a few bullet points here. The Star Tribune article. Ben Gessling, deep dive. He talked to 20. He and then his colleagues, Andrew Kramer and Mark Craig, talked to 20 different people within the organization, many of them granted anonymity just because otherwise they wouldn't talk. Like, I don't want my name on this, but you go ahead and here's the vibe inside the room. Some of this has already been reported. Some of this is new. All of it reinforces the weird vibes that we all felt, that many of us felt throughout the season. So let's start at the end. Rick Spielman showed up on Monday last week thinking that we're going to fire him. We are going to fire Mike Zimmer today. It's a glorious day in Rick Spielman's mind. He probably woke up, gave his wife a big hug and a kiss, said, finally, we get to look for a new head coach. He did not expect his own dismissal last Monday morning. And despite the shocking dismissal, it was Spielman that addressed the team at 9 o'clock last Monday morning. Zimmer did not. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, Mike addressed him basically as dead coach walking on Saturday before the game against the Bears. So I think he thought, well, I have fulfilled my obligations to talk to my players. Bye, I'm out. Rick was caught off guard. So my thought about this is in trying to recklessly speculate and put the pieces of the puzzle together for why a guy who had started his own GM search to find his replacement because he was going to get a new title is suddenly fired. Mike must have come to the Wilfs with something. Like, because I don't think you would decide that late. Well, we're a little bit concerned about the GM candidates not wanting Rick looking over our shoulder, which is what I previously thought. But then the more I thought about this, if Rick showed up on Monday, like the Wilfs would have told Rick days before that, hey, dude, you know what? Probably not going to work to put you in a president of football ops job and then have a GM who wants control, and that person might be concerned about your presence. So like that, what I just said makes sense, but it also makes sense for the Wilfs then to have come to that conclusion the Friday before, right, Phil?
Yeah, it feels like a conversation took place either with a candidate or some other information came to light.
Yeah.
In like the 72 hours or more leading up to Monday, and then they did an about face.
Yep.
That's what it feels like.
And so the only person I can figure that would have gotten to them that would make sense probably is Mike. because they liked Mike. And if Mike said, hey, look, I haven't talked to this guy. I mean, let's play this out recklessly speculating. But when we recklessly speculated before about how bad things were, we didn't go far enough. So let's go off the cliff.
Reckless speculation.
You know, the Wilfs liked Mike. And I wonder if the Wilfs didn't talk to Mike at some point in time over the weekend, and Mike said, hold on a second, you're keeping Rick, but not me? Let me tell you about Rick.
We haven't spoken in months.
And that's what I was going to say. It seems incomprehensible, but what if the Wilfs, and I'll fault them, I'm not giving them a pass here, but what if the Wilfs legitimately didn't know that the coach and GM hadn't spoken, and then the coach is like, that guy hasn't talked to me for 4 months.
Yeah, and this kind of goes to, so Alex Boone came on Purple Daily last Tuesday, and I told you this during our emergency episode over the weekend, but I'll bring it up here on Mackey and Judd too. He said something I kind of disagreed with in the moment. He said, it's a bigger problem than you think that the Wilfs live in New Jersey and they're not in that building on a daily basis. He said, when I played, it was a big event. If the Wilfs would show up, however often that was, it wasn't like they were just like never there. But when they showed up, it was like, the Wilfs are here. Okay, let's straighten up a little bit, Maybe you put on a non-bacon collared shirt. And he said the fact that they live in New Jersey, it's harder to have a pulse on the daily operations inside the area. And if what Deion is getting from Zimmer, that it's been months since Rick and Mike have talked to each other, it might be a little bit of an over-exaggeration. But if, let's say, they just like had a falling out, they just hated each other, and it was just a non-working relationship going back to like the middle of the season, that's something I would want to know if I'm an owner. Okay, this is crisis mode. We're in a playoff hunt right now, and there are roster decisions to be made, and you guys aren't speaking? Like, did they know, and they just figured, let's just ride this out. We're gonna make some moves anyways. But they were in a playoff hunt. It's so bizarre. Let's keep going here through the Star Tribune story.
Yep.
Many described a working environment that was too impersonal, too unresponsive to change, and left them too much on edge. Veteran assistants like Tony Sperano, who was the Vikings offensive line coach for a few years before he passed away in 2018, or co-defensive coordinator Andre Patterson, did damage control with players who were stung by Zimmer's public criticism or silence. Sources said, by the way, the next thing I'm about to read, I remember bringing this up last year, and some people laughed like this. You're taking this way too far.
Wow.
And now it has been confirmed.
Yep.
Sources said defensive end Daniil Hunter experienced the latter, meaning like he felt stung, after choosing season-ending surgery on a neck hernia in 2020. Remember, Zimmer came out publicly and someone said, hey, have you spoken with, it had been like 3 weeks since the surgery, and someone said, hey, have you spoken with Daniil Hunter yet? How's he doing? And he said, I haven't spoken to him. Very tersely said, I haven't spoken to him. You're what? Your Hall of Fame caliber pass rusher that is one of the most like ferocious defenders in the NFL just had a pretty major surgery, and you didn't even like call him and ask how he was doing a couple days later? No. I focus on the players that are here, right? Players tried to return quickly from injuries, fearing longer recovery time would jeopardize their standing in the organization.
And don't forget, too, so to go back to the thing with Daniil in training camp of 2020, the tweak thing was what Mike really thought. So, like, he got mad at the media because they thought that he knew it was severe and was lying. He was told initially, it's a tweak. So as it got worse and worse, Mike stuck with, it's tweak. It's just a tweak. And that's...
Are you saying Mike had a hard time adjusting and adapting?
And so, but I think that's why the Hunter camp, as they learned that this was not a tweak, said, screw it, we're going to get this done. Go back to Sharif Floyd. Back in the salad days of Mike. Those were the good old days. He literally called out a guy whose career whose leg or knee had been butchered by accident by the surgeon. He literally called him out as being not tough enough to be playing right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was no, when it came to guys who were hurt, there was not a lot of room. I mean, come on. God bless the kid, but let's go to the Dalvin game against Pittsburgh. Do you really think Dalvin Cook was in any condition as a human being to play? And now, look, Mike is not. This is not all Mike, and that was not one where I'm sure there were a lot more teams that would have done the same exact thing. But all of that being said, here, yeah, Mike looked at things as tweaks and dings, and I'm sure Mike thought he just got his bell rung. Why is he not on? Playing. So yeah, that's. I just caution here though to quickly to slow down a little bit. There's a lot in here about what Mike did wrong, but I do think we need to expand it to there were a lot of people that did things wrong too. So like this piece by the Strib, which is good, and I'm not faulting them one bit. The only thing I didn't like is it leaves people dumping on one person, and that one person's a major part, but certainly not the entire story.
Yes, and also I think the fact that a lot of this was just sort of left unchecked by the front office and the players too, that there just wasn't enough leadership presence. You can in the NFL especially, you can check your coach. In the New York Giants are the classic example, right? The players literally called a come to Jesus meeting with Tom Coughlin in the offseason of 2007 and said, "Guy, we ain't going to play for you if you're going to keep doing this," right? And that was led by Strahan and some of the other veteran players. And just on the Danielle Hunter front, I remember when that came out and it was like, wait, he hasn't spoken with Danielle Hunter yet after a major surgery? That's super weird and impersonal and a major red flag when it comes to his leadership and ability to connect with players. Like, why would you not care about his well-being, right? Let's continue here. After the 2014 season, according to a source with knowledge of the situation, Zimmer went to Hugh Jackson. So this is after his first year. Went to Hugh Jackson,
this guy
asking his friend from the Bengals coaching staff to teach him more about offensive play calling so he could better evaluate Norv Turner. How about that? He's going to Hugh Jackson so he can evaluate Norv bleeping Turner, who's on a different level than Hugh Jackson and Mike Zimmer. Zimmer grew more outspoken about pass plays he didn't like or a need to run the ball more on the coach's headset during games in 2015. And then eventually he had a big blow up with Norv Turner, and Norv Turner just resigned midseason.
Right. So the thing about Hugh, who I think won 5 games, and some ridiculously low total during his coaching tenures. Perhaps he had a little bit more success with Oakland at the time, but that came out publicly. That got out that Mike had, after 2014, had gone to meet with Hugh and tap Hugh's mind. What can I do? What can I know? And I'm sure Norv's because Mike deserved credit for the hiring of Norv in 14 based on this. Mike had been a coordinator. Norv had been a head coach. Now, I thought he was not a great head coach, but that's beside the point here. And I recall going back on our show, Phil, we talked about, good for Zimmer for having the confidence in himself to know what he knows schematically and what he doesn't know. And he is bringing in a guy who clearly knows the offensive side of the ball, and Mike is not threatened. We talked about this whole thing because it looked great. But then after 1 year, and of all the people, he didn't go consult with, a Bill Walsh type, right? He didn't go consult with a guy who is known for his offensive genius. He went and consulted with Hugh Jackson and then tried to evaluate Norv. And I'm sure at some point, as we saw then when he quit after the Bears game, Norv Turner just said, screw it.
Yeah.
What are you even doing? You hired me to do this, and now you're telling me you got to run the ball more. You got to do this. So
yeah, it's and as it's been told to us, at one point, Zim brought Norv into his office and just dressed him down for not running the ball enough or for whatever it was. And Norv basically looked at Zimmer and said, "Guy, I'm Norv bleeping Turner. I know offensive football. You hired me for a reason. If you don't like it, then I'm out." And he left. There may have been more to it. There's been some speculation, but can't confirm.
Or maybe not.
Maybe he just left without any altercation. Zimmer quickly grew. Also, the next couple seasons later, Zimmer quickly grew irritated by John DeFilippo's preference for complex play design, run-pass options, and throwing to set up the run, staples of the Eagles' offense that had torched the Vikings the January before. I'm going to pause there for a second. There's another anecdote here. They knew exactly what they were getting in John DeFilippo. They knew what system the Eagles ran. They knew that it was much more pass-centric. And so to be shocked and floored that DeFilippo was going to come in here and Kirk Cousins coming on board, we're going to put the ball in this guy's hands. And at the time, it was like, let's see if Kirk can be the guy, like they can throw the ball 650 times and whatnot. After the Vikings scored 37 points to improve to 4-2-1 against the Jets, sources said. So they beat the brakes off the Jets on the road, 37-17. Just destroyed them. And they're 4-2-1. Because remember, the first couple months of the Kirk Cousins era was like, this is great. I mean, they're
Eagles game, right?
The Packers game. Yeah, there was the Eagles game. There was also that they lost that Thursday night game against the Rams, but it was like just bang, bang, back and forth. And so they hang 37 points on the Jets, improve to 4-2-1. They win that game by 20 points. And Mike Zimmer lambasted DeFilippo in a team meeting for not running the ball enough. He had made his issues with DeFilippo's approach public after losses in Week 11 and 13, and then fired DeFilippo shortly after. The Vikings would not score more than 24 points the rest of the season following that Jets win where they scored 37.
So if you go back, I believe there's an anecdote in that story in Sunday Strib as well about the fact that the biggest hands in the DeFilippo hiring were Spielman. It wasn't
Toronto.
Mike. Yeah, I always thought Mike said, "Oh my God, you beat the brakes off my defense. Show us how."
He's not reflective enough.
So let's go. So let's start to put the pieces of the puzzle of the deterioration of the very important working relationship between GM and coach together. That would have been definitely a key one, because obviously what Mike said was, "I want to run," and I don't know, like. There is a fighting chance that Hugh Jackson went a long way toward ruining Mike. Because like Mike hands off was probably not great, but okay. But if he had voiced objections to Rick and said, this DeFilippo guy, I mean, he's going to pass the ball. I don't know. And Rick said, oh no, this is where the league is going, Mike. We should do this. I could see this as being a big line in the sand as far as the problems, because then I'm sure after a victory over the Jets, who are awful, if Mike lambasted DeFilippo, that immediately gets back to Rick, right? And Rick's probably like, well, hold on a second. I got your quarterback. We're scoring points. Everything's great. All you have to do is make sure your defense is as good as possible and not piss people off, and you're causing problems. So like that would cause an obvious, because I think what we have found out and are finding out more and more is if you did something that Mike didn't like, Mike was going to get you.
Yeah, he comes off as so much more petulant and insecure now. The last couple of years, in retrospect, there's a couple more anecdotes here.
Yep.
Sources said that Mike Zimmer gave a Wednesday presentation. So this is like a week and a half ago. Gave a Wednesday presentation about all the bad things that happened to him in his 8 years with the Vikings, like Peterson's suspension in 2014, the Bridgewater knee injury, and so on, leaving the players dumbfounded. So at first I thought, when I was reading this, I was like, oh, he gave a presentation to ownership, which, by the way, dude, bad things happen, adversity happens, it's the NFL, it's life. You got to get over it. You got to find a way to overcome, adapt, right? And the fact that his last ditch effort was to say, look at all the bad things that have happened to me. It's like, yeah, but dude, bad things happen to a lot of teams and players and coaches, and sorry, we need someone to be able to overcome those things and not be woe is me.
Right.
Ownership then met a few days later on Monday after the firings took place. Ownership met with players for an honest conversation about the culture change that seems to be coming as the Vikings look for a coach who can better connect with players.
Well, first of all, you might want to consider that before, like months before or a year before. I hope you were trying to sit down with guys that you consider to be the pulse of the team long before this to talk about things. It appears that they weren't. So Mike Zimmer putting together a presentation for his players about woe is me seems odd, but I would love to do a book someday on the end of football coaches' time in places. Because Brad melted down too. Childress went absolutely nuts. So, like, this is not, like, the end a lot of times is ugly. Like, it gets bad because they're desperately trying to save their jobs. They're definitely trying to get themselves, if nothing else, absolved of blame. So, like, that was the least surprising thing. It's funny, but in the end, I mean, these coaches are control freak, right? Egomaniacs. And all of a sudden, they get wind of, or no, there ain't no net there now. Like, your fault, you're going, and they do anything they can to try and save their own hide.
And you know what? Like, this is, I know Childress kind of went out the deep end more in 2010, but Childress was very hard-headed. Players thought that he was a little weird, right? He was very much, this is my way or the highway. He, for 3 years, was jamming that kick-ass offense down everyone's throats, even though he never had the right quarterback to run it. And what you need, when you have a coach who's a little bit my way or the highway or old school or whatever, you need someone to balance him out, an equal or close to equal leader of some kind. And that's where Brett Favre came in 2009, right? Like, Brett Favre came in and almost balanced it out the other way. He's like, no one listens to this guy over here, right? I'm running the show here. I know that people get mad every time I make it about Kirk Cousins, but if Kirk was more of a dynamic leader of a locker room, I'm not saying all things would have been perfect, but it would have balanced this out more. Like, if those guys had a better relationship, and a lot of this is on Zim for not wanting a better relationship.
Yep.
But wherever it comes from, and a lot of times it comes from quarterback, right? Bill Belichick, cranky, salty, demands a lot of his players, and Brady was sort of the California cool guy that would come in and be the good cop to the bad cop, and it worked for the locker room.
Right.
And the Vikings, whether it was from the quarterback position, I mean, Teddy Bridgewater kind of provided that for a couple of years, actually, behind the scenes, even though he was a rookie and a second-year guy. But they never, like, outside of that, they never really had that balanced-out personality and leader to check Mike Zimmer.
And Mike didn't like Kirk, so Kirk couldn't go to Mike. I mean, the thing with Teddy was Mike loved him. So Teddy, I'm sure, could go close the door and say, what are you doing?
Yeah, change your face.
But Mike, let's change this. With Kirk, it took 4 years for Mike to agree to sit down once a week to talk, and he hated the guy. Now the problem with Kirk is Kirk's awkward, so he doesn't know how to break that ice. I mean, it was on Kirk and Mike in 2018 to say, it doesn't seem to be going great between us. We got to get there. In fact, Bradford's first year here, because he came late, I think Mike was icy and not that great. And I don't know if it was Bradford or the two of them, but they got Mike, I believe, before Bradford's second year that summer to go to Oklahoma and sit down and eat with Sam and talk through what don't you like? What do you like? And Mike came back and is like, yeah, this guy's great now. So that's where, how does that not take place after 2018 when Kirk can see, I mean, Kirk's an adult, okay? So he's not a child. It's not like, oh, my dad doesn't like me. What should I do? And also for Mike to say, I'm tying, like it or not, I'm tied to this guy. This is my guy, and he's going to be my guy. So, we have to make this work. Not, I don't like you, I'm going to ignore you for 3 years.
It's weird. It's almost like Zimmer hated the signing so much and was vindictive about it.
Yes.
And got more curmudgeonly and salty and harder to be around and deal with, right? That instead of swallowing his pride and saying, all right, this isn't what I wanted, and it's definitely going to erode my defense a little bit, because we just can't spend the money to keep guys or sign guys. But I'm going to evolve. I'm going to make this work. I'm going to be the best damn, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to have the best relationship between a defensive coordinator guy and a head and a quarterback in the NFL that you possibly can have. He just never.
Well, and how did Kirk before he signs that contract? If Kirk is truly about trying to win, okay? So, because, I mean, clearly the contract was great. But if Kirk is about, okay, the contract's great, but I want a Lombardi or two. Before you sign, how do you not go out with Mike and say, let's talk?
Because I don't think that was a priority for him.
Okay, that's a problem.
Yeah, well, we're
That's a big-
we're kind of seeing
That's a big problem.
4 years of all this awkwardness.
Now,
Yeah.
now, can I give some blame to Rick, too, though? Because Rick Spielman, I'm a people person. I understand people, now has a full file of things that just from a fundamental human relationship standpoint, he screwed the pooch on. Look, I'm going to give you the one I think is top 3 at least. So in training camp in 2010, Rice shows up. He's hurt. It's clear he's not going to play for an extended period of time. So Sidney Rice is out. Spielman then tries to work a trade for Vincent Jackson with the Chargers at that time. That falls through. The story I've been told is that Rick then finds out that Bill Belichick is shopping Moss. And so Rick goes to Childress and says, I can get you Moss. Can you control him? Now, let's just stop there for a second. Let's just say that either of you are on the phone with the Patriots, and you guys watched or covered, in Phil's case, Brad Childress for quite some time. I don't have to ask Brad that question. He can't control him. And Favre and Moss together is literally a chemistry experiment that is going to blow the building up more than a meth lab going wrong would.
Without the right coach to control them.
But that's what I'm saying. But would you go to Brad Childress? Like, you know Brad's problems. Brad got by with Brett because Brett was Brett, but you put Moss and Favre together, you better be one of the best coaches of all time to control that, or really good with people.
And then you fast forward to 2018, very, very different circumstance, but Rick kind of did the same thing, right? He kind of went to Mike Zimmer and said, "Hey, if we sign
right.
Kirk Cousins here, are you going to be able to make it work?" And and I don't know what Childress's feedback was when that question was asked. Childress might have said, "Oh yeah."
I think he did. Yeah. But that's fine. You can say what you want. I know the truth.
And Mike probably offered up reservations, right? I'm guessing Childress said, "Yeah, I mean, this ship is sinking. Let's get some talent in here and see if we can turn." It was worth the long shot because they were bailing water at that point in 2010. Like, you might as well take a swing and see what happens. But they weren't bailing water in 2018. Like, they had just went 13-3. And so, like, to your point, Rick has tried to sort of shoehorn some things in as the general manager.
Yes.
Without the proper green light from the coach or without the right conversation. Hey, I know you're not going to love this, but, like, let's get on the same page here because I really think this is what's right for the football team. It was always, well, I guess we disagree, but we're bringing Kirk Cousins on board. Or I guess we disagree, but we're going to trade back and get this player in the first round and Kellen Mond in the third round, even though you're not going to develop Kellen Mond at all. And then you're going to make fun of him at press conferences.
And Mike was Rick's guy. Like, you literally said, screw you, when you hired him.
By the way, this article,
right there, fireable.
This article details that those guys really hit it off early, like the interview process. They bonded over being, over their dads being football coaches, and they bonded over having kind of an old school ethos when it comes to coaching and running a team. And then over the course of time, I mean, the fork in the road here, everything points to 2018. DeFilippo was a fork in the road. Cousins was a fork in the road. And that's when everything started to erode. And the indictment on Zimmer is, listen, man, you got to adapt too. Okay? You're not you can't just replicate 2017 over and over and over again. That was you caught lightning in a bottle and then you got whooped in the NFC Championship game. Okay, what's the next evolution? You're not going to have the 1985 Bears defense eroded over the course of 3 years. Like, you can't keep the number one defense for 5 years.
And the thing too, and this is the Wilfs. The thing too, especially in this sport, it's probably true of all sports, but especially this one in particular. In almost every situation when it comes to coaches or players, it's better to cut bait early than late. The loss to the Niners in the playoff game in 19 should have been it for Mike. In retrospect, that's crystal clear now. It wouldn't have been for Rick, I don't believe, but like, if you were going to lose to the Saints and fire and or possibly trade to Dallas, Mike, That one win, clearly with what we're now seeing as far as things coming out with the culture, that one win shouldn't have saved him. And especially when Kirk was tied to you and you knew that. Like, in that sense, I fault Kirk too. But at some point in time, when you're paying a quarterback as much as Kirk, you have to close the office door and say, this guy's a big baby and he can't really lead, but he got some talent. Who gets that from him? And the answer would never be in 1,000 years, a guy who hates his guts, Mike Zimmer. So come on.
It's tough because all of this stuff was percolating on the inside, but on the outside, they just beat the Saints on the road in the playoffs. And
but that's what I'm saying. You got to make tough calls
forward here.
Sometimes you got to do tough things, man.
So that's all the reporting that's been coming out over the weekend from Deion Sanders, of all people, and from Ben Gessling and the Star Tribune. And also, we mixed in some things that we've been hearing throughout the last several weeks there as well. You got one more thing on this before?
I've got one more thing. Please play the reckless speculation sounder. I've had this theory, and now I think it's 1,000% true, and it's ready for public consumption. I think Mike and Rick spent at least if not the end of this year playing hostage with each other's players. And I'm going to give you one perfect one. Yes. I thought this at the time, but now I think it's 1,000% true. Mike, as far as I know, couldn't stand Kyle Sloter.
Yes.
So at the end of the season, he mysteriously spends about a week and a half on the roster again, okay?
It's hilarious.
But here's why. Here is the hostage crises that we encountered and didn't know about. The 3 third-round picks now, because Jones played a bit. But Wyatt Davis, Kellen Mond, Chaz Surratt were held hostage by Mike. The Davis thing is now BS. Was he perfect? No. The Chiefs
deactivated all year,
the Chiefs took a guard in the 6th round who's been starting all season. Dude. 3 rounds after Wyatt Davis, okay?
Yes.
Kellen Mond, was he going to play? No. But was he so unable to play that he, just like Wyatt Davis, deactivated throughout the course of the entire year? And then when he was in for 3 snaps, the coach said, you saw him.
He also looked completely unprepared in those 3 snaps, almost like the coaching staff had spent 0 time with him. Hey, kid, just go run the scout team all year and just try to mimic Aaron Rodgers. Try to mimic Justin Fields.
He was a hostage. He was a hostage. He should have put out some type of thing saying, I'm safe. My name is Kellen Mond. I'm with the Vikings. Don't inquire about my whereabouts.
Blink twice if you're okay.
Honest to God. Because Rick, I kept thinking, why did Rick go get Kyle Sloter? I now know why.
It was
a tit for a tat.
I love that theory.
Bleep you. No, bleep you.
Speculation.
All right.